Good morning, everyone. Welcome to VCIO Perspective, our monthly webinar, where today I'm joined with John Iskow, co-owner and partner at Kumo Partners. Our VCIO Perspectives webinar is pretty simple. We bring business technology consultants together. We share our perspectives of what we're seeing in the real world with our real clients, and talking about topics that are helping organizations be more productive and be more secure. John, how you doing this afternoon? Oh, this morning.
I'm doing great, Ray. How are you?
I'm well. What's one of the topics that you and I have talked about, John, for some time is something that's popping up seemingly everywhere. Organizations that are asking how do they do more with less, that they've got solutions in place that are not quite right, but they're close and can use a crafty hand in helping to speed up their everyday operations, as well as bring additional insights and value. So that falls right in line with improving business processes through automation. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your team and what you all have been doing?
For sure. Thanks, Ray. I really appreciate that introduction, and I appreciate everyone's time joining this webinar today. I'm really excited to be here and talk about leveraging automation and how we can use low-code platforms that are already out there to make our lives a little bit easier. And so a little bit about Kumo Partners. It was founded by myself and two colleagues who were working at a much larger consulting firm at the time. We were in a position at that point to recognize the value of the low-code platform and what it can actually bring to organizations, because we were working on various Fortune 500 clients when one of the largest low-code platforms in the world currently came out. And so as our skills developed along with the industry, we realized that the value could be brought to small and mid-sized organizations as well. And that's when we decided to branch off and found Kumo Partners. And as we founded Kumo Partners, we like very much to tout the fact that we built most of our internal solutions on low-code platforms, and so we can actually say we drink our own champagne here and use them and use the platforms for our own good.
I like that. I've heard another phrase, but I think I prefer the drinking our own champagne. So yeah. we talk about low-code platforms, and when they came out, I assume you're talking about the tools that are within the Microsoft 365 stack.
Yes, exactly. We specialize in the Microsoft Office 365 Power Platform. It's in my opinion, my humble opinion, it's one of the better it's one of the better low-code, no-code platforms out there. And we'll be talking about that a little bit today. I have some demos based on it, and so excited to show you guys a little bit.
I have one question for you. When you say these come out, I always find it hilarious that Microsoft, a lot like Apple, they'll just release capabilities out into the world. Usually we know they're coming, and then when they land right in our in our laps, they're within our environment, and they're on our computers every day, which is where we're starting to see a lot of businesses say, what is this? I have it, I have a subscription to it, I don't understand it, I don't know how to do it. How do you know it's coming? Have you been in the Microsoft world before these new capabilities so-called landed in our laps?
Great question. And so I've worked in the Microsoft space since about 2010. And Kumo Partners, when we founded it, we took special care to build a relationship with the Microsoft team. And so we're a Microsoft partner. We're in tight contact with a lot of their sellers and their resources. And so when new functionality with the Power Platform or their low-code, no-code applications comes out, we've got the, I guess, insider knowledge, we'll say, on when it's going to come out, how it's going to affect our clients, and how we can work to drive value through it.
Okay, great. Well, look forward to. I want you to tell us a little bit about some stories and how this seems to be a topic of conversation.
For sure. And so hopefully this doesn't sound too familiar to those on the call, but a lot of decision makers are in a tough spot these days. Many decision makers are facing challenges that they've never seen before, and the challenges that they're facing have real-world deadlines that impact the organization and the decision maker's own career. And so along with those challenges, often through internal or external pressure, decision makers are pushed to develop new sources of efficiency for their organization as well. And a lot of times this is without the budget necessary to overcome the problem that they are presented with using traditional tools. And so decision makers are in a tough spot. And so when you're in that situation, it can be hard to spot those easy avenues for success. And before we dig into those avenues a little bit more, I wanted to take a step back and take a look at what drives an organization to undergo a digital transformation in the first place, because that's really what low code platforms are. At the end of the day, it's a digital transformation of an organization. And so a changing workforce driven largely by a younger crowd is driving demand for business tech in the workplace. These technologies, of course, help an organization weather challenging and volatile economic times like currently. However, that business technology is being implemented as rapid technical advances in society are occurring and continue to occur, if we're being honest. Seemingly every time I turn around, there's new systems and new functionality for those systems coming out. But this just leads to more complex systems that come with a steep learning curve for both the users and IT managers alike. And
Well,
so,
we're bombarded, right, John? I mean, we're
yeah,
bombarded by, the silver bullet of there are solutions landing in our inboxes and our advertisements on our phones and computers and emails about solutions that are already out of the box, and they're there to convince us that if we change a little bit of our processes and maybe a little bit of our people, we could probably see some efficiencies. And that's always the challenge, right? Out of the box, custom, or some sort of hybrid approach. So the rapid technology advancements and the demand for more tech seems to be rearing its head more and more.
completely agree with you, Ray. And that drives me to my next point really well. So exactly to what you just said. Traditionally, when you're talking about leveraging business applications or solutions, you're really talking about building your own software or buying an off-the-shelf piece of software. Both are great options, of course, and both come with their pros and cons. And the pros for building custom software, of course, is that you can typically get everything you want, but of course, it's going to cost a little bit more money. And buying off the shelf, it's cheaper, but you might get locked into a licensing deal. But on the flip side, you're able to get on the platform pretty quickly. And so more recently, with the rise of low code, no code platforms, there's that third option. And so with low code, software requirements can be understood and translated into functionality really quickly and then iterated on with the stakeholder in a team effort. And so it brings together the tech side and the business side to collaborate on a solution for a process in an agile manner, making sure that requirements are met with the minimal time spent in actual development.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're working in that low code, no code environment, or I would say approach, some existing systems don't need to be entirely replaced, right? So you're still getting the benefit of whatever the source of data is, whether it's a software that's already niche to an organization, or let's say it's a mother of all spreadsheets, or SharePoint lists or whatever. You're still able to use the systems that are in existence, but you're able to extract the best the best information in the best way, and amplify what you're trying to do in a little bit of another way.
Spot on. And that's one of the things I love about low code platforms, in all honesty, is that by minimizing the amount of coding needed, and low code platforms replace basically the need to build custom code by giving users a set of ready to go UI components like a button or a label, as well as integrations with third-party software. And Ray, to your point exactly, that allows low code solutions to slip in really well with an organization's IT, because it essentially gives you a blank slate to say, hey, I want this action to occur when something else does, or I want to look at the data in a certain way and build an application along with your current data sources to fit the way that you want to see your data.
Yeah, it also feels like you can get started and get a solution faster, in my opinion, because you're not focused on necessarily, swallow the ocean, so to speak. You're able to take what you've got and get something workable, right? Workable software in our hands, rapid development.
Yep, basically, putting it down to its base level, it just means that a user doesn't need to know how to write the code for the application to display button. They just need to drag and drop a pre-built button onto the application page.
Gotcha.
And so with the low code industry and the low code platforms that are out there on the market today, we're essentially looking at three different types of low code categories. The first is workflow automation, and you can think of something like Zapier, Power Automate, or UiPath for this one. A lot of you may have familiarity with some of these platforms, but these tend to be used for projects like automating repetitive tasks, processes that may need approval from a manager, moving data between systems like Ray and I were just discussing, or notifying end users when events occur. basically any similar process that can be translated well into a step-by-step flowchart-like approach. Workflow automation really just aims to increase the efficiency and productivity by reducing employees' workload as well as mitigating the risk of errors in manual data entry, making sure the data is correct on entering the system so you don't have to do cleanup later.
Yeah, some of the examples you've got below, a lot of these types of low-code platforms are, the day-to-day challenges that I would say not one single challenge may take an organization into a realm where they want to spend a lot of money automating, but it's a bit of a conglomerate, right? A death by a thousand cuts. How many repetitive tasks are occurring every day? How much data entry is being hand jammed by whom and how often and in what systems? What's the state of that data integrity, right? Once it's being used, what are all the approval processes and how are we doing them these days? I'm sure we've graduated, hopefully, from passing around, manila envelopes or clipboards around the conference room or even around the office. But I would bet that there probably are electronic versions of that envelope approval process going on through email or SharePoint, and it's probably could probably be streamlined and either reduce go to market on something or releasing of valuable intellectual capital that organizations are trying to generate revenue off of. So I feel like these are all good examples, but I also feel like rarely is it one single task that takes an organization into a place where they say, you know what, let's start investing in automation. It's a conglomerate of these things.
Yeah, that's a great point there, Ray. And to tell a side story briefly off of that, when Microsoft first released Power Automate, Power Apps, and what they call the Power Platform in late 2016, my colleague and I were working at a Fortune 500 hardware retailer, and we were tasked with learning how to build these low-code solutions and implementing them for their supply chain and operations team. And over the course of about a year and 1 month, we built out 32 different projects for them individually, starting off with a simple workflow that all it did was save attachments that were sent to a shared mailbox into a shared file location for them. Very simple 4-step workflow that saved them a lot of time and value because they didn't have to click on the email, open the email, download the attachment, upload the attachment to their file server. And then over the course of time, these projects scaled. And over the year and a month, when we stepped back and looked at what we had accomplished, we had essentially figured out that we delivered $1.2 million back to this hardware retailer just through these 32 projects over the course of a year. And so we could show the ROI and efficiency that we were creating these solutions with and delivering to the organization. And so that's a little bit about the automation side of things. But the second type of low-code platform, application development, typically handy when you have a process that requires a lot of different users across the organization to interact with a process or process data in a custom interface in a structured manner. So I'm sure a lot of people are using Excel for current processes to track certain things. And I'm sure a lot of people listening have a painful Excel process, something that's annoying to their team to do on a day-to-day basis, or it's hard, or it's difficult to learn. Painful Excel spreadsheets are really great use cases for low-code application development because you can protect the data itself and allow the users to interact with it and change it in specific structured ways. And so you can control how the data appears to your end user, call out the problems that you want to call out to the users that need to see them. And you can typically do all of that in about a quarter of the time that it takes to develop an application normally. And so lastly, with this, the one on the right here, analytics and reporting platforms like Tableau or Power BI in this case can enable organization decision makers to gain really valuable insights from their business data and just make better decisions as a result. And the highlight of these data dashboards really is that they can typically pull data from a lot of different sources and display key organizational statistics as graphs for easy consumption. So in this case, if you think of something like a financial scorecard for how an organization is doing and being able to produce that and then iterate on it with improvements as the business grows at speed. And so this would help the financial scorecard stay forever relevant both to the team that it's being worked on and leadership. And so those are the types of local platforms that we see currently on the market. But each of these low-code platforms drives immense value on their own, but what connects them as a part of the low-code movement is really a belief or a manifesto similar to the Agile manifesto, if we're familiar with that, but defining the best practices for those who work with low-code platforms. And so this manifesto was put together by one of the application development low-code platforms out there called Mendix. They did a phenomenal job, in my opinion, of creating the manifesto. And essentially the points it makes can be summarized as follows. Technology is ever evolving and business challenges are getting more complex. The pace at which those business challenges progress and technology evolves are only going to continue to increase exponentially. And so in order for an organization to keep up, innovative and timely solutions are needed that are both built well and deliver real business value. And so critically, these solutions need to be developed very rapidly to address issues as they arise. Because if an organization has a problem now, it doesn't do any good to wait 3 months to go through a procurement process to get the software that they need if they're going an off-the-shelf route. And it doesn't do them any good to spend a year developing a solution. They have the problem now. And so low-code platforms really intend to replace those drawbacks that we were just discussing, being that the time frame that it takes for a solution to be developed can typically be prohibitive. And a lot of the development time that's being used to create the solutions currently are being spent on foundational or repeatable programming tasks that don't necessarily provide direct business value. And so this usually leads to IT departments being overworked, unable to take on new projects, and leads to organizational slowdowns and shadow IT occurring.
So John, I got a question for you. So I'm pretty familiar with the Agile Manifesto, and I think most organizations have either adopted the mentality and the mindset with Agile. It feels like, and tell me if I'm off, but the low-code manifesto seems similar, but it's really the emphasis is on speed, and to your point, not focused on building foundational, repeatable, code, but really delivering the business value faster by using either existing software or solutions and stitching them together through code, and not really focusing around, I don't know, we'll call it a custom app, right? If delivering custom app is the end state that you would desire, one could argue if you did it through low code, you could deliver the answers you need without the interface, and the nice flashy product sitting on your phone, but you could still get the data and the value of it, in your own environment without all that. Is that about right?
110%, because
Okay.
Organizations typically have IT infrastructure already in place, right? They have servers, they have software that's currently being used by their employees that the employees know they're used to. And so we don't necessarily want to replace everything, right? We want to just make what they currently have easier for employees, and we can grow that over time. And so typically when we go in and talk to people who are working in an organization using systems day to day, they're saying problems like, I don't have a data. It would be really nice if I could see the data this way, or it'd be really nice if I could click a button and it sends this data to my manager for review, something along those lines, something that extends their current software, but doesn't necessarily replace it. And
Right.
so that's where low code really slides in well, because it can pick up in terms of workflows. We can trigger workflows from almost any software in the world that has an API, and then do any action that we want with that data after the workflow gets triggered. And in the case of an application, we can connect to as many different data sources as we want to. So it doesn't matter if your user data is in Microsoft's Azure Active Directory, if your sales data is in Salesforce CRM, if your contracts are in DocuSign. All that matters is that there's a connection to it already built into many of these systems. And so if there's not a connection, we can actually build one pretty rapidly. And that enables us to bring data together from many different places and essentially stitch together the processes, like you said, right? So let's talk a little bit about what low code can do for you and your organization. And really, studies have shown that the three main value points that emerge from the adoption of a low code platform are democratizing development, it provides significant ROI, and enables insight and innovation throughout the organization. So at the baseline here, essentially being able to provide people with simple tools that don't require a ton of technical knowledge gives them the building blocks to create a workflow or an application to solve a relevant challenge that is stressful to them. Ultimately, since these are the people with their boots on the ground, this helps drive innovation and organizational change and keeps the organization fresh and moving forward, as well as providing the organization significant ROI through things like decreased development time, decreased maintenance time, reduced IT spend as a result, increasing the output of their IT team, because again, it takes about a quarter of the time to produce a low-code solution in this case, and then digitally transforming vital processes in itself is just a very valuable approach. And so I want to break down what I mean when I'm talking about democratizing development for a second, because this is one of the key points that Ray alluded to earlier, and is one of the key points of the low-code mentality. So what I'm referring to here is a simplification of development, so that it doesn't take years of training anymore to be a good developer. And so a lot of the complicated development pieces traditionally is being handled by whatever low-code platform is being used on the project at this point. And so things like hosting, server infrastructure are all being taken care of by whatever platform you're using to develop the solution. And so this inherently expands an organization's tech team because it enables workflows and applications to be built by regular users, which makes IT's role to ensure that there are guardrails in place. And it makes IT scalable no matter how big the organization gets. And so furthermore, as I pointed out, with development times that are typically about a quarter of the time of traditional development, low-code platforms are a much quicker way to effectively implement a digital transformation at speed and then iterate on that process. So if something isn't working for you, there's a much less of an investment in it. You can readjust really rapidly, make the changes that you want, and keep going. And so as the development of the low-code solution is occurring to enable that agile iterative process, whomever is acting as the developer can interact with the process stakeholders to really rapidly iterate on ideas and validate that they provide value before spending too much time diving in and building out the functionality.
And maybe you can answer this question, John, if I can interrupt. One of the questions that came in was around Agile, right? It's around iterations, and I'm sure there's some gray area here, but we're talking a lot about using tools we already have, stitching solutions together, not over and delivering value fast. One of the questions was around Agile and what the difference is between Agile and Scrum. And I guess my next follow-on question would be, how do you see, those methodologies or mindsets, and how does that work with low-code development?
Those are both great questions. And so Agile and Scrum are fairly similar. I have to admit, I'm not 100% familiar with the differences between the two, but my company uses an Agile mindset to handle our projects. And what we tend to do is, because a lot of the low-code platforms, when you're talking about development on an application, you're typically talking about a single developer rather than a team of developers at this point. With a single developer, it's much easier to put that agile process into place where you're working out of 2-week sprints and you have tasks built out as a backlog to say, okay, you're going to take this next, you're going to take this next. The only thing that I've seen with the agile approach that I don't think necessarily works as well with the low-code platforms is that with Agile, you're really meant to be, developers are really meant to be able to jump at any part of the backlog, pick out a task, and complete that task with Agile, it's a little bit more difficult because there are restrictions around how many people can be working on an application or workflow. And so when you assign developers to an Agile mindset, you typically want to assign them to a pillar of the project. So if you're building out workflows, an application, and a data dashboard, you'd want to assign one developer to the workflows, one to the application, and one to the data dashboards, just to have an easy, make it a little bit easier.
Right.
A lot of the tools are building in multi-editor capabilities at this point, but it's not at a point that I've tested and feel comfortable endorsing yet.
So one of the things that you mentioned in here is focusing on business value. When you're going through your meetings with organizations and you're talking about business challenges, and then you're talking about potentially in that same meeting architecting the solution through whether it's a workflow or some other piece of low code stitching and development.
Mm-hmm.
How do you assess the value of that? I mean, are you sizing it right there, estimating how much work it's going to cost, and having those conversations with the client to say, okay, this is going to take X. How much time is it currently taking you in this situation, and over time, and where do you recover those costs? Is that part of every single, discussion, or how else are you
100%.
focusing on value?
100%, because typically a lot of the reasons why people approach us at this point is that they already have a problem. They already have a pain point, and they want to get that pain point over with. And so when they come to us, typically what we do is we sit down, we understand their problem, ask them questions, really dive into what they want, what the process is now, and what they want it to be. And then moving forward, we sit with them to iterate on the process as we're developing. And so it really helps to drive the usage of the solution rather than just developing for development's sake.
Right, because it's cool, or it would be nice.
Exactly.
So that leads to another question, actually, if I can ask, because you talked a little bit about having a problem and processes and buying in. So one of the questions is that, two of the obstacles with digital transformation taking place at their organization is, one, processes being documented already, and then two, getting team buy-in. Are there any advice or tips to help with the implementation? So I assume you run into that oftentimes. You got, processes that aren't written down, they aren't mapped, right? They're not drawn out in business process, review style and given to you. I'm sure you would love that, right? Something that's already in place visually. So how do you get your arms around processes and how they work, and then how do you address the buy-in?
For sure. And so the best way to do both of those things is, in all honesty, is to make sure the stakeholders are as involved with the process as possible. And that's what I think low code does really well, because we don't have to focus on the traditional development pieces like infrastructure, server, and all that. Literally everything we do is directly visible by the client or by the process stakeholder. And so I tend to sit with my clients each week on a 30-minute call, go through the last week's progress, explain to them how we were building things, what we were thinking, and then they can tell me where, hopefully I went right, or sometimes if I went wrong. And that way it can be corrected really quickly without me spending too much time going down that route. And then with the buy-in piece, if you get the process stakeholders talking about the process itself, people a lot of the time really just want to talk about their pain points and want to feel heard. And so if you're doing it well throughout the process, you have essentially ready-made buy-in at the end. And then if unfortunately that hasn't been done quite as well throughout the process, I typically like to take a communications approach towards the end of the project. And so if I sense that the buy-in isn't quite there, what I'll usually do is I'll start to draft up email templates that'll be sent out reminding people that, hey, this is coming, here's what you need to do, as well as providing things like a single page FAQ within the app, or instructions within the app, or workflow, just to make it easier for people, because you really do want to meet users where they're at. Actually, side point on that too, the Microsoft Power Platform, which we specialize in, since Microsoft's vision is for Microsoft Teams to be the central portal of Office 365, users are pretty used to either working out in Outlook or in Teams for their communication if you're a Microsoft user. And so Power Apps, Power Automate, and the rest of the Power Platform for Microsoft does a really great job of meeting their users where they're working. And so we can embed applications within Teams, we can have workflows run from Outlook, from Teams, and really make the user's life more efficient, easy. And once they see that, and once they see that we're not trying to automate them out of a job, we're just trying to make their day-to-day life more efficient, the buy-ins are usually a little bit easier.
Yeah. Okay.
So calling out an ROI point here, Forrester did a report in 2021 on the ROI that an organization actually receives when they implement Microsoft's low-code platform that we've been chatting about here, and found the 3 main points to call out were that first, on average, low-code development platforms reduce development costs by about 60%. It's not true of every use case, of course, but typically it takes fewer developers to produce a solution at a quicker turnaround time than traditional development, and so cost reductions are to be expected here. Second, on average, low-code projects return an ROI of 362% to the organization, through both direct cost savings and indirect time savings. And lastly, the value of a typical low-code project typically equals the upfront cost that the organization spent to create the solution about 6 months after the solution goes live. So those are just the ROI pieces that can be calculated, but where I typically find that the most value is derived is from the insights gained from the data itself. And so managing data and getting insight from it can be really difficult for many organizations, mainly because, as we've been discussing, that a lot of organizational processes are informed by data coming from a lot of different sources. Companies' user data might be stored in Azure Active Directory, their sales data in Salesforce, customer contracts in DocuSign, and it can be hard to view the process holistically as a result. And so low-code platforms are built with that problem in mind, because they're typically built with integrations into other platforms pre-existing, or they allow you to build the connection yourself relatively quickly. And so this really enables greater visibility into processes and the items that are moving through the process, as they're able to see the information about the item moving through the process from various data sources in a single location. It also increases, we found, the time frame that the organization has to react if something goes wrong, because you're catching something quicker, you're catching a mistake quicker. And so using this approach also tends to reduce the communication needed between departments, because just in the use case of onboarding here, an HR user could go into an application, an onboarding application that we've developed, see all of the new employees' sensitive information, current information, contact information, while somebody else, maybe a finance user, going to that same application would only see the user's basic contact and banking information needed for payroll. And so rather than sending an email to check on the status of a new employee, which takes time away from multiple people at the end of the day, the user is empowered to look at the application and get the data that they need, because they know where it is, it's in a single location, and they can trust it. And so I want to look at an example of enabling the user to quickly access the data and the processes they need on a day-to-day basis. And so I have a demo prepared of a business application portal that we built in the past. So I'll just pull that up here. Actually, let me pull it up on this other screen. Let's stop sharing for 1 second.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned a little earlier about just trying to figure out how much time to spend on these things. The engagement part, right? Getting engaged in these meetings, talking about. You said it's helpful to talk about some of the things that you're wanting. I think it's probably been, in my experience and what we've seen with our clients, the most valuable part of this. It's the solutions and things that we talked about that we never built, because we were able to talk about them. We were able to talk about the business value of them. Maybe it was an idea from another department. Maybe it was an idea that you might be, having over time, and it's never been really materialized. And then you put it together in a meeting. Meaning you've defined it, you've looked at it, you've estimated how long it's going to take, and then you've really critiqued how much value really is this, and then putting it on a back burner or putting a pin in it and putting it somewhere else, and then never doing it because you've talked about it so much, and over time you've developed and been using the software to realize we never really needed that. And I value the things we never spent time building, because I feel like it's a major cost saving. So the value for me comes out of the conversations and the meetings, because you're able to share these ideas, you're able to get into the business value and really understand what is it that we're really trying to achieve.
Yeah, typically the users with their boots on the ground in terms of the processes are the best people to talk to in terms of how to make it better.
Yep.
Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. So this is a example of a business application portal that we built in the past for a large US retailer, medium-sized US retailer, I guess. And so on the left-hand side, I just want to immediately point out that we have different links listed under each relevant business group. We, as an admin, I'm logged in with an admin account currently, are able to see all of them, are able to see every application and group contained in the portal. But as an example, an HR user might only be able to see their relevant to business applications in this HR section here, the new hire onboarding and the expense reports. They wouldn't necessarily be able to see sales, operations, project management if it didn't apply to them. If that HR user needed to view another application, they certainly could, but just to highlight the ways you can break it down. And so I want to point out this expense report application that we're looking at now. This was produced in about 4 to 6 weeks. And I want to highlight some of the functionality behind it, because I think to be able to produce a solution like this in 4 to 6 weeks really highlights why I think low-code platforms are a little bit of a groundbreaking solution, because we were able to tailor this to the client's exact requirements and the client was able to have this in about a month. And so when any user across the organization needed to submit an expense report or check on the status of an existing expense report, they'd open this application in their portal, and they'd immediately be presented with their expense reports that were pending approval here. I'm just going to select new expense report just to highlight some functionality. Before we create the new expense report, we're prompted for the title and who the manager is that's going to approve the expense report. And this is really key because it's actually going to auto send the manager of the expense report a notification both through Teams and through Outlook that, hey, you have a new expense report, please come into the application and fill it out. And so I'm going to fill out, I'm going to choose myself under a different account, so it will not show up as with the account that I'm logged in as. But from here, I'm going to go ahead and add expenses. And so we can see when we come in here, we're shown various expense options to include on the report. We have travel expenses, meals, entertainment, mileage log, all of that. And we're able to have custom fields for each section. As the user traverses through the sections, they're able to see each item that they filled out in that section. And so I'll actually just fill out 1 or 2 quick ones here to illustrate. Here, so I paid $1,200 for airfare, and I added this expense. And so now going through meals and entertainment, don't have any expense, travel expenses, go back and it's listed under there. So let me just add one more expense here. And now let's say, okay, I need to, my organization requires a receipt. We can actually attach files directly to the receipt. And so I'll actually just include this ICS file. But now if we go through, we can start to see summary statistics show up at the bottom that on total travel expenses are $1,200 and total expenses are $1,200 as well. Mainly because I didn't add entertainment. So now total meals and entertainment, $55, total expenses, $1,255. And you can see as we go back and forth that the statistics change as we'd expect. And so now one of the better things I think about Power Apps is that we can actually design it to be, we can actually design it with fail safes in mind. So let's say we go out without submitting this, we don't think about saving it or anything along those lines. We go out, the Power App actually automatically saves the report for you in your open section here. And so if I switch back to open, we can see that report I just filled out still in my open report section. If I go back into it, the 2 items that I filled out earlier are still here. And if I click on submit report to show you all, we designed this because they wanted to see the summary statistics in a way that their users clearly could not miss before they submitted the report. And then one of the really nice features here as well is that we actually require the submitter of the report to sign their name before they can add a signature. So you can see that when I sign my name there, the submit report button highlighted, and now I'm able to click it. I can add comments and do all that. But if I submit the report, essentially it does a really nice job of connecting to a workflow that actually sends approval in multiple stages. But just to speak through the functionality real quick, what it's going to do is it's going to put the expense report that I just submitted into my pending items here. And now it's also going to be under the approving manager's pending columns as well. And they'll see an additional number report assigned to me over there. And so if we go into this, this is one I submitted, but I'm not the manager. This is the one I just submitted, but I'm not the manager on. You can see that I don't have any edit capabilities. I'm blocked from editing it because the expense report's in a different stage. I can view the request history, see the status report on what's happened with this file. I can add notes that go to the manager as well and stay there in perpetuity. But I can't edit anything. And so that was this company's strict requirement that they did not want their employees to be able to do that. And that's customizable to any organization that wants to build a solution like this at the end of the day.
So is this a custom software solution, or is this something that's using low code that ties to other things, John?
That's a great question. And so this is something that uses low code that ties to other things. In this case, this actually ties back to their HR system that tracks their PTO, as well as how much is remaining in their budget. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I
Okay.
believe the integration was with QuickBooks. I'd have to go back and double check that, to be honest with you, though.
So that was going to be my next question. So challenge, you talk a little bit about in this scenario, you've got an expense report system that's built within the Microsoft world. Looks like there's a variety of other tools and applications on the left-hand side that are supporting the rest of the organization in a variety of ways.
Yep.
But in this scenario, I would assume a large organization would have an existing software application that uses expense reports. And so talk me through that. Is that a conversation of we can use the existing solution, and or how do you know when to go somewhere else, right? We have an application, this is where we put time and expense. We have an application, this is where we do our budgeting. So, talk us a little bit through that.
For sure. So low code, and especially my mindset is that you don't want to go into a company and try to sell them a low code solution necessarily. You really want to listen to what their problems are, and if their problem is that they have an expense report solution already, but that expense report solution doesn't connect to their QuickBooks, then we can quickly pivot and say, hey, maybe you would need a workflow that triggers when you enter something into your expense report application, and then that sends that information for approval to a manager. And if the manager approves it, it automatically gets entered into QuickBooks. And so we can design a process, and low code really allows you to design and tailor processes exactly around the business use case and around where the organization currently is, to fill the gaps and create a foundation in ways that existing software really just can't. So this, at the end of the day, is just a blank slate. Like if somebody came to me and said, hey, I hate these status names up here, I want you to do a drop down, it would be the work of about 30 seconds to change these 6 buttons into a drop down, or how the process works here.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, yeah, I highlighted some of the notifications that get sent out, how this happens. We can see items that are approved, rejected, items that are assigned to me as the manager, as well as giving the users an easy way to change data within the app if they're an admin. And so I'll call this out a little later as well, but in this case, they wanted to be able to change like the mileage rate, the job codes, and manage admins within this application here. And so certain groups within HR had the ability to do this. And so the button on the homepage here wouldn't be visible to the everyday user. It's only visible to those designated as admins. And so you can actually break down your security roles inside of an application to be as granular as you want, especially even with a workflow application or data dashboard.
Can you tie the security roles to an application built in this environment to other security roles already used throughout Microsoft?
Yes, you can. And
Beautiful.
so because Microsoft groups are stored in Azure Active Directory, you can actually pick up on Office 365 groups, Microsoft security groups, distribution lists, and use them as security mechanisms when you're going through the app, for sure. And so I'll highlight one more app here, but in another scenario, the same retailer we were just discussing had 70 plus locations across the United States. They needed a way for their store managers to be able to submit incident reports to the organization. And so the application that we're looking at now, the store managers had this application on their iPhones as well as store-bought tablets, because many low-code platforms, including Power Apps, is responsive. And so store managers were able to submit incident reports really quickly after incidents that occurred in the stores, and corporate was able to react to it in a much quicker manner. So I'll just show, let's say a user wanted to fill out a product loss report in case of a theft in the store. So once they click on it, they were able to see the past reports that they filled out. They go down through the information. But if we were filling out a new piece, one of the really nice things I think about Power Apps is it allows you to structure the data in a way that suits your organization. And I know I said that a lot of times, but I think this is a really good value of it, because not only are we storing the general information on the product loss recovery form, we're allowing users to say, hey, are any of these optional sections applicable? Was there an employee witness? Was there a police report filed? And if it's not there, no harm, no foul. The user doesn't have to fill it out. But in addition to these forms, we can also store various items with it. So if I wanted to record that this store law, 2 sunglasses were stolen, I can fill this out real quick. They were $120 a piece. Fill out a SKU and a description. And so just an easy way to manage different types of data inside of one report. And it's not just items here in the form on the front, but a narrative of the incident with rich text. You can bold, do numbered lists, really store detailed data there, as well as submit related files to that report. And so it's just a great way of keeping everything together under one roof in a cohesive manner.
Where's this data being stored, if I can ask a technical question?
Ray, I love that you led me into that next point perfectly. So
Accidental.
one of the best points about all this is that this data can be stored anywhere you want to. It really doesn't matter. And so how I want to illustrate that is that if we look at the bottom left-hand side of the screen here, we'll see a menu that prompts us to change the area of the application. And I will say that this particular functionality is specific to Microsoft, but other platforms do this differently. So this may just be different in whatever platform you're looking at. But in this particular application, we have apps, and we have an app section, and we have a data section that's only visible to the admins of the portal itself. And so if we click on data, this is just dummy data that I filled out for the course of the demo, but we can actually see that the expense reports application and the incidence reports application that I just demoed to you, these are the data tables that support the application as a whole. And so in this case, the vendors that we're looking at, these are stored within Microsoft storage. But if we look at something like this expense reports data set up here, this is actually stored within SharePoint. And so when I mentioned that it doesn't necessarily matter where the data is stored at all, a lot of that is because we can do things like either one, link out to it for management purposes, or two, directly connect to it for application purposes and pull it back. And so when users and IT managers come back in a couple of years and they don't necessarily remember where the data is or how to perform edits on it, they can just switch the data, see exactly what is supporting what application, and then have that single data set in a single place of mind to make changes.
Yeah, one of the advantages I could see from a virtual chief information officer's perspective is trying to control that information sprawl, right? If it's being controlled, stored within a client's Microsoft environment, whether it's in Azure or let's say it's even in an existing AWS infrastructure, the data hasn't sprawled beyond the infrastructure realm, right? We're not putting this data in, let's call a software application cloud product, where you're storing it in a third-party place. And then when the decision comes to how to analyze that, yes, you can get access to some of that information through APIs, but the data is sitting in someone else's world. And at some point, if you make a change, you're going to have to move that data. And that's going to be, oftentimes, people will take the path least traveled, right? And so they'll analyze whether the move is worth, the squeeze, so to speak. Whereas in this scenario, you're stitching solutions together. You're still keeping clients in a world that they're already in. The data, from a security standpoint, is much easier to control from a CIO's perspective. And then, as other departments start looking at other applications, you're using basically the data from the same warehouse.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's one of the hugest points of all this, is that once you start building applications, dashboards, workflows, you can use this single data set as the single source of truth for everything that you're building. And so everything is synced up together, no matter whether the user is viewing vendor information in an expense report application or an incident report application or a shipping application, whatever the application is, they can see that same data set. And so you only have to manage it in one place rather than a million different locations.
Okay.
Let me go back to the PowerPoint and finish that up. Okay, so after all of this, I think a lot of people are thinking, how do we get started with low code platforms? You know, where do we begin? This is a little bit of an exhaustive process. And so the best place to start, in all honesty, is just starting to understand your existing processes. Which ones are painful and shouldn't be, which ones take a lot of time and don't necessarily provide a lot of value. Once those processes emerge, if you start to break it down into its core components, it's a really helpful viewpoint. For example, is the pain point of that process an email being sent that takes a long time to generate, or an Excel file that has to be updated manually? At that point, you could consider engaging either with a partner or a tech-savvy user in your organization to build a proof of concept. Put the low-code platform that you're using to the test, and honestly, if it works in that scenario, continue to identify other scenarios. As the projects get bigger, you may need help, but I bet there's a lot of quick wins out there that you can get started with just to see the power. And so if you're looking at various platforms and wondering which one to pick and choose to get started, um, I'm a little biased, but you might want to consider Microsoft's Power Platform. It's the platform we've been talking about today. It's the one I use to build the applications I demoed to you. And a lot of the functionality is actually free to you if you already have an Office 365 business license. And so that makes it a great place to get started, because something like 70%, 70, 80% of the organizations in America have a Office 365 business license already. And so people already have a lot of these programs and might not even know it. Just understand that as you grow, whatever platform you use needs to have guardrails in place. So as an organization, you might want to block connections to certain websites or data sources for your users, but having that low-code platform available for your users and putting guardrails in place, really, we found, enables an organization to drive innovation and growth by utilizing your existing resources and supplementing them with support where necessary.
Yeah, you make a lot of great points, John. I think, where to start, if that was an easy button, I think more people will be moving forward. But I would say that in most cases, just understanding and that there is a valuable process for evaluating existing cumbersome processes, putting a dollar figure to fixing those, and then creating a solution that is rapid and usable within weeks. That process and methodology exists, right? And it exists with, like you said, existing software or easy to use software that will keep your environment and its data in its place and present a solution that not only delivers business value, but something you can build upon, right? Incrementally. If you're able to solve one problem, one cumbersome process quickly and put it in place into your employees' hands 2 weeks, using existing software, it tends to cascade from there. So from an organizational buy-in perspective, start with the decision makers and start to our experience. Start with the decision makers that are running departments or controlling revenue, and see where there's opportunities to improve that, because it's going to pay for itself over and over, and innovation will then kind of start seeping into other departments. And that's just based on our experience, not only as a Microsoft Gold partner and a consumer of both custom software as well as low-code software, at evaluating our current clients. How do they get started? They usually pick a problem. They pick a problem that is fundamental to their business. They talk about it, they devise potential solutions, they put dollar figures to them, they evaluate whether a solution is going to return it value and at what pace, and then they incrementally improve that solution through other solutions. And so to me, that's been the easy path for us for getting started. It doesn't have to be you've got some good charts up here, but it doesn't have to be a sales roadshow evaluating every software program out there. We found it that just through conversation with IT departments, with IT partners, and developers, just trying to understand, what are we trying to achieve, and really focus on that business value. Okay. That should lead us to Q&A. I know we've only got a few minutes left. A couple questions that already come in. Sounds like I'm getting a few notes that we've already answered a few questions, which is always a good thing. Are there any known changes? One question is, are there any changes coming to low-code platforms that we should look out for?
That's a great question. So really where we've seen the most value being driven from new functionality lately is in the form of AI readers. And so what I'm really referring to there is that a lot of these low-code platforms are putting in place functionality to allow you to do things like read data from a PDF or an image or a form that your users are filling out. And so a lot of people have data entry teams, that'll take forms that they get, enter data into a system. What we've been getting a lot of lately has been people saying, can you build us an AI model that reads this PDF form when we enter it, takes the data, sends it into our database, and then actions on it from there. And so I'd keep an eye on that space, because I really think that that's where a lot of the functionality and value is going to be driven from next.
Okay. Well, John, we covered a lot of area today. I appreciate your time. For those that attended, this webinar will be made available on demand, as well as our previous ones. Last one we covered with one of our chief information officers was about how technology is impacting hiring and retention. We've got another set of webinars on the schedule in October and November. One Ask Me Anything, a session with Mainspring's chief information officers, specifically around key security controls. And then we've got a timely session in November around jumpstarting annual IT budgeting and planning. I'm sure an exercise that speaks to many that are looking to turn the calendar year and be prepared. So look for those invitations and sign up today. And again, I wanted to appreciate your time, John. Thanks for taking us through low code and manifestos that are landing in everyone's laps today with solutions in place. If anybody has questions, feel free to reach out to John or myself. We're both on LinkedIn. Thanks for your time, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.